What is going on, everybody? Good morning. Welcome into the College Football Breakdown Show. Here I'm going to break down the Black Friday slate, Friday after Thanksgiving. We have a nice 9-game slate here. I'm not sure I'm going to get a chance to make a video breaking down the main slate because it's a weird week. It's a holiday week. So I'm just not sure how much time I'll have because I'm not going to be doing this on Thanksgiving. Not sure I'm going to be able to do one the day after. So this is kind of how I'm treating the main slate. I'm not quite playing it quite as heavy, but this is the one I'm going to be playing most this week. So a note on that, so I'll timestamp everything. So if you want to skip this, go ahead and skip it. If you are playing college football, DFS, you need to be checking Twitter constantly for updates. You need to be checking the news constantly for updates. If you're not doing that, you shouldn't be playing because you're not going to win. There's so many late inactives. We don't know until right before kick. Nobody knows. I compile a list of all the beat writers on Twitter. I compile a list of all the other college football writers on Twitter. And sometimes the news just doesn't get out. It's the way it happens. Last week, two of my most known players, Rakeem Boyd, Jordan Addison, both ruled out. Travis Etienne, his game gets postponed. I also had a ton of Etienne. Etienne Boyd was a very common running back group I was going with. So it's just the way it is. You have to adapt on the fly. Sometimes you make good adjustments. Sometimes you don't. I stuck in Taysir Mack mostly for Addison. That was the wrong move. If I stuck in Turner, I would have been rolling in it, but I didn't. You go into scramble mode, and that's what you have to do. So Black Friday, if you're not able to do that, if you're going to be with family or whatever, then don't play this slate, or at least don't play it very heavy. Personally, what I'm doing, I know the game starts at 9, 12:30. Well, we got a little bit of different times here, but I know when the games start, and I'm going to be checking before each game if I own any of these players. I'm not going to be on my phone all day long. Probably won't be watching football all day long, but if I'm not doing that, I need to be checking for updates as they go along. All right, let's get right into it. Our first game we have Iowa State versus Texas. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because you should probably know these teams by now. They're pretty well-known teams. I think either team is fine. I'm not targeting this game huge. I think it makes some sense from a game stack, but I don't think it's going to be quite as high scoring as people would think. As far as Breece Hall goes, I'm not sure I'm going to get there this week. But he's always fine, as he is every week. His price went down a little bit. Texas, surprisingly, is allowing only 3.1 yards per carry on the season, which is pretty darn good. Brock Purdy at 6.7 is a fine option as a QB2 in the Superflex. His volume isn't fantastic, but he usually gets the job done, and he's not super expensive. Hutchinson is their clear number one guy at 5.9 thousand at wide receiver. I went to him last week, and he was great. He's been very, very consistent. He had 20-plus points, 6 catches, 111 yards, touchdown. And except for that 4-point dud, he's been 26, 19, 20, 16, 17. He's been super consistent. He's their number one guy. Behind him, it's Charlie Kohler, who sees a touchdown about every game. His upside doesn't seem to be fantastic, but he's their number 2 guy. Other than that, I think you're reaching. I'm not playing anyone under that. Go for it if you want to. Texas, Sam Ehlinger, we know what he's all about. I think he's fine on this slate. I'm not sure how much I'll have, and I don't think that makes him contrarian because he's on Texas, and I'm not really sure they will ever really be contrarian. So I think he's fine this week, but Iowa State's a good defense. They're good against the pass, good against the run. They blanked Kansas State last week, so I'm not sure how much you're going to want to go against them, but he's a fine option since he does have that rushing ability. As far as the wide receivers go, Josh Moore at 6,000 looked like he was going to be their top guy. Sounds like he's probable. Sounds like he should play. I think he's fine, but I think he's very risky at 6,000 just because his game logs are all over the place, and we've seen what he's doing. When he's on the field, he has big games and he has bad games. So other than that, I think Jake Smith is the guy I would most target in this offense. He's the slot guy. Slot guy usually sees the most targets in this offense, and he's been pretty consistent since he's been on the field when he's been healthy. But my concern here is that Jordan Whittington is probable to come back, and that gives me some cause for concern because way back in week whatever that was, I played a lot of Jake Smith. He didn't play out of nowhere, had a hammy, and Jordan Whittington had a pretty good game out of the slot. Now, he's converted running back to the slot position now, and he looked really good. So I'm not sure what the timeshare would be. I'm not sure if they're going to – I would be kind of surprised if Jake Smith sees, all the snaps if Whittington plays. But does that make both of them fine? Yeah. But I think Whittington's such a dice throw at 4.1. He could have a very big game. He can do nothing. He could split time. So that really throws a wrench into Texas for me. And I don't have a perfect answer. We haven't seen them both on the field in the same game. I would lean Jake Smith with his pedigree. Other than that, Brennan Eagles, I like the price on Brennan Eagles. This guy dropped pretty much every pass that was thrown to him last year, but he's been a lot better this year. And you can see his game log. While I don't think he's gone over 100 yards once this year, so I'm not sure you're going to get that 100-yard bonus. If you just need a lineup filler who may catch a touchdown, I think he's fine. The running backs are kind of a mess, and Iowa State's good against the run. Sounds like Ingram's probable, but I think all four of these guys, Robinson and Johnson, will get carries as well. Ingram's questionable play, and even if he does play, he's been dealing with an ankle injury. So how much can you expect? So I don't love anything there, but the prices are decent. Bijan Robinson, the freshman, has really taken away this backfield. Of course, that's been while Ingram has been hurt. Against a very good West Virginia defense, we saw he went for 113 yards. He also gets some catches out of the backfield as well. So, all right, moving on. UMass against Liberty. So if you're not familiar with UMass, I'm not playing anybody on their offense. They average 4 points per game. 4 points per game. They average only 174.3 yards per game, which is also last in the nation. They're last in pretty much every category. Last in passing for non-option teams. Just bad. So the UMass defense, also bad. They allow 6.6 yards per carry. That's a half a yard worse than any other team. That was last year's stats. Then this year they may look a little better. They have a 5.6 yards per carry allowed, but that's been against bad teams, and that's still a very bad number. Still in the bottom 10. So I'm going to be interested in Liberty. Malik Willis, he's really expensive if you can get there. I think there are a few good quarterbacks, so I don't necessarily think you have to play Willis, but I'll play a lot of Willis. We saw he had a bad game against NC State. That was his first bad game, and look at the rushing upside. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't go for 100 yards and a touchdown, at least on the ground in this one. I'll also play a lot of Josh Mack. I think you can stack them too. Their running back situation's been a mess because everybody's been injured, this and that. But it seems like Mack's the top guy. Last week he came back, and he was the top guy with 12 carries. Didn't really do all that much, but that was against NC State, against UMass. Come on. So I think Josh Mack is a very strong play. And the wide receivers are decent. They could just get up big and not throw the ball a ton. If you're playing Willis and want to stack, Noah Frith had I think it was 3.4 on the night slate last week, and that was great. Played him 73 yards and a touchdown. I would think he'd be their top guy going forward, but it's very difficult to tell. Again, they've had a lot of injuries at the wide receiver position. How's it going to stack up? I'm not sure. I don't see why CJ Daniels is the most expensive guy. I think he's more of a boom or bust guy, so maybe in GPPs, but that's not where I'm spending my money. The only other guy I would consider playing would be CJ Yarbrough. This guy's very talented, but he's been injured. He came back last week, and he hasn't really done much when he's been on the field. You can see there. So I think Frith and Yarbrough are their two best wide receivers. But, I'm not sure they've been healthy, and I'm not sure that's going to play out that way on the field. We know the most talented guys don't always see the most work. As far as Liberty goes, they average 5.4 yards per carry and 238 yards per game on the ground. They average 37 points per game, and UMass allows 38. So you're gonna need some Liberty players unless you make a lineup where you go contrarian and don't play it. But for reference, last year these two teams played, and Liberty won 63-21, and they amassed 730 yards, total yards. So do what you will with that information. All right, Nebraska versus Iowa. With Nebraska, we don't know who their quarterback's going to be. It was Luke McCaffrey last week. He couldn't throw the ball, so then they brought in Adrian Martinez, who also can't throw the ball. And they've been pretty mum about who is going to play this week. You saw Adrian Martinez came in for a little bit against Illinois last week. Nebraska, by the way, got pounded by Illinois last week, so I'm not giving out many bets, but I like Iowa. Iowa's been really turning it around lately. They've looked good. So Wan'Dale Robinson, it all comes down to the health. He left last week. I think he took a big hit is what happened to him. And when I was searching the news, so I'm recording this Wednesday morning, day before Thanksgiving. When I was searching the news, there wasn't anything on Wan'Dale Robinson. He was giving press conferences, giving quotes to the media, but nothing on his status. I would assume he plays, but who knows? And even if he does, he might be a little banged up. And then their running back, Dedrick Mills, Missed last game, seems questionable, and again, I didn't see much information there. So that's something to monitor. Either way, Robinson's their second leading rusher after Luke McCaffrey, their quarterback, and he's their leading receiver. So it's pretty much Robinson or bust in this offense. Any wide receivers below him. This guy, Xavier Betts, is getting more playing time. He hasn't really had a big game yet, but he did take a long score to the house. I guess it was a flip pass, so I guess it was a catch to the house 2 weeks ago. He's the only other guy I would look at. The quarterbacks, we don't know who's playing, so I don't see how you can do that. This Iowa defense, very good against the run. 2.6 yards per carry allowed. I think that might kind of stifle Nebraska's rushing offense, which in turn would force them to throw, which is not something you love to see, unless you're an Iowa fan. All right, as far as Iowa goes, they're mainly a running team. They average 5 yards per carry on the ground, which is very good. And this Nebraska defense can't stop the run. Number 116 against the run, allowing 223 yards per game and 4.7 yards per carry. So what that tells me, what Nebraska wants to do, Iowa shuts that down. What Iowa wants to do, they're going to be able to do. So I like Iowa in this game. How could you not? I mean, I get Nebraska's a volatile team, but Iowa's usually about as consistent as they can be. They had a very tumultuous offseason. Look it up. You don't know what I'm talking about, but they seem to have leveled out after some strange first few games. So Tyler Goodson is the main running back here at 6.4. Him and Sargent split carries. Goodson still gets more carries. I think he's still the better player, and he gets receptions as well. But Sargent, I mean, he's been a vulture, and he's been running the ball well himself. Goodson's more of a three-down back, and then Sargent's more of a red zone guy. But you can see there, Sargent's been pretty consistent, 25, 14, 15, and 12, outside of one bad game against a very good Northwestern defense. I think either one of these guys are fine. I would lean Goodson, but either one of them are fine, to be honest, at this point. I definitely think Goodson has the better price point, but Sargent's price point is fine with what he's been doing. I don't have any interest in the passing attack. It's been bad. If I'm looking at a receiver, anybody I would look at, I mean, nobody's been seeing consistent targets. Sam Laporta at 3.6, probably their tight end, probably has the best price point, but he hasn't been doing much lately. Amir Smith-Marset hasn't done much, and he's been in some trouble this year as well, but he's back on the field, and he is their most dangerous home run threat on the offense. So at 4.1, could he break a big one? Yes. Is he going to see consistent targets? Absolutely not. All right, UCF versus USF. Definitely interested in the UCF side of things here. If you are unfamiliar with them, they average 86.3 plays per game. That's a lot. That's first in the country. That's first in the country by 4.3 plays per game. So the pace, love the pace. They average 42.6 points per game. That's dragged down by, 33-point performance, 30-point performance against Cincinnati last week. They average 377 passing yards per game, and they average 6.8 yards per play, which is all extremely good. Something you want to target. USF defense hasn't been good. They're giving up 208 rush yards per game at 4.9 yards per carry. They're slightly better against the pass, but still give up 215 pass yards per game. So anybody on UCF is fine. Absolutely anybody. We saw how bad USF is against the run. Issue is UCF likes to give three different guys back. Three different backs carries. So Otis Anderson at 4.9, he's more of a safer floor. Greg McCray usually gets more goal line work as a touchdown guy. I think either are fine, just with Anderson's price point. I guess I'll have more of him. And Bentavious Thompson at 3,000. I don't think he should be min-priced. He's not a super strong play. You see the last 2 weeks he's combined to barely have 1.7 points. But he's had games where he's been at over 10 or right at 10. And if this one's a blowout, which it's lined to be not a close game, you see there he has 3 touchdowns, 259 yards. While that's not fantastic, that's not a min-price player. So something worth mentioning. As far as the passing game, I'll play some Dylan Gabriel, of course. It could be a blowout, but like I said, they run so fast that they could score 42 points in the first half. Is it a possible letdown spot after playing Cincinnati? Of course, it's possible. But, these receivers are fine. Marlon Williams is the clear-cut top guy, 8.1. He should probably even be more expensive than he is. Just look at his game long. He's a monster. He's a red zone threat. He sees a lot of receptions, sees a ton of targets, and he sees a lot of touch. I think there's nothing. He's already over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns on the season. So if you can get up there, that's fine. I'll probably in most lineups, be playing 2 stud quarterbacks. So I'm not sure how much I'll get to these other studs, but like if I have Gabriel and Willis or Gabriel and Ellinger and able to fit Marlon Williams in there, then yes. Jalen Robinson should still be their second leading receiver at 6.1. That's too cheap as well. He's had some very big games. Against Cincinnati, he did not have a good game. He still had 14 fantasy points, but it seemed like he dropped everything. Every time I looked at that game, it seemed like he was dropping something. So he could have had an even bigger game is one way you can look at it. The other way you can look at it is Trey Nixon is back. There was debates before the year who would have a big year, Marlon Williams or Trey Nixon. For reference, he went over 800 yards and had 7 touchdowns last year. He didn't do very much last week. He wasn't on the field a ton. It looks like he's not fully healthy, but he did still get 5 receptions. I would imagine that only goes up as the year goes on. Like I said, they're on a short turnaround playing on a Friday after a tough Cincinnati game. So not ideal situation, but he's probably too cheap at 5,000 as well. I mean, this offense is fantastic. Anybody below that, Harris at 3.9, he has to catch a touchdown to have value. Big guy. It happens. I think O'Keefe's value really takes a hit with Nixon back. If Nixon is not at full strength still, then O'Keefe will see some snaps, but that's a dart throw. He could do worse dart throws than anybody on this UCF team, to be honest. But yeah, as far as the USF side, I'm not really interested. This offense is so bad. So bad. Johnny Ford's their top running back. I guess you could look to him. UCF has struggled against the run for most of the year, but they've been better of late, and were actually decent against Cincinnati. I thought they actually did a pretty good job stuffing the run for the most part. So it gave up a fair amount of points, obviously, but Cincinnati's a good team, man. So yeah, there's nothing I like here. The only guy I would consider playing, Randall St. Felix, wide receiver at 3.4, I guess. He was supposed to have a big year. He's done nothing. Brinkman, their tight end, is a good tight end, but again, he hasn't really done anything at 3.3. Kelly Joyner. Where's Kelly Joyner? There he is at 3.5. This guy is a home run threat speed. Their second leading back. They split carries a little bit, but you see the carries haven't been great, so it's risky. All right, moving on. Notre Dame versus North Carolina. I mean, this is the game of the day. Very big game. Looking forward to this one. For Notre Dame offensively, they averaged 37.6 yards per game and 6.3 yards per play. Very good offense. And North Carolina does not have a good defense. North Carolina is usually a team you're going to want to target. I think a game stack is perfectly fine here. North Carolina's defense allows 30.8 points per game and 5.7 yards per play. Most notably, they just let Sam Hartman, who has been struggling most of the year for Wake Forest, they allowed him to go for 429 yards and 4 touchdowns last game. So, of course, I'm going to have me some Notre Dame ownership. Issue is here for Notre Dame, they are down 2 offensive linemen, down 2 starting offensive linemen, and that's a big, big, big part of their football team. And Kyron Williams left their last game. He's probable to play. I think he's going to play, but we have to wonder about the workload here coming off injury in a game that he didn't finish. He did have 2 weeks to prepare, so maybe. He's still in consideration for me, but it's very risky. So Kyron, a quote that Chip Kelly gave, he said, "Kyron had a little bit of an ankle, but nothing major. I think the week off did him really good. He looked good in the weight room this morning. We weight trained this morning, and he had no limitations. We were speed squatting, and he had no limitations. He looked good. His power looked good coming off the floor. I don't expect any problems with Kyron." Reason I don't exactly love that quote, while he's saying he doesn't expect limitations, which is good. I mean, it's kind of coach speak for one, and for two, I was looking up Braden Lindsey's status, their wide receiver, and he was mentioning he was practicing and he was progressing. Here's how he practiced. Here's the next step for him. He was giving all sorts of details, and for Kyron, he just said, "Oh, he weight trained. He's able to lift weights, and he looked good." Well, is he able to play football? I mean, not sure how I feel about that. So I have some worries. Ian Book, a 7.3. I'll definitely have some Ian Book in my lineups. Very consistent in a game that should be back and forth. Again, I think a game stack is in play. I think you can play him as a one-off. He's been running the ball lately as well. So I like Ian Book. I mentioned Sam Hartman's numbers last week. If Kyron Williams is banged up, Sebo Flemister, their running back, should be the guy behind him at 4.7. Very risky. I would lie to you if I said I didn't already set a lineup that had Chris Tyree in it. It's a dart throw, but we saw when Williams was out for the second half against Boston College, Tyree saw 17 carries, and this guy's a phenomenal back. I think he was a 5-star. Very fast, could break one against North Carolina, absolutely at 3.2. It's risky. He's probably third in the pecking order, but it's close. So I'm not even sure if he would be considered third. I think him and Sibo are, 2A and 2B. As far as if you're going to pair book with anybody, I don't think you have to. If you're going to, I think Skoranek had 3 touchdowns last game, so I think he's their top guy. He's been getting better and better. He was injured for a while this year. Definitely not a safe play by any means. I mean, the way Notre Dame uses their wide receivers, especially this year, it's more of like, I'm not sure what I can compare it to, but they're out there for blocking, they're out there to establish the run, and they'll catch some passes, but they'll rotate. There's no clear number one guy. This is a good football team. They're all buying in, but it's not, for fantasy purposes, especially at the wide receiver position, it's not necessarily ideal. I would have interest in Braden Lindsey if he was playing, but he's been a mess this year, and they haven't really been giving us good news. He's not listed on the depth chart, so I would assume he's not playing. Brian Kelly did say he will give a new depth chart if Lindsey is playing, but can we trust him? Not really. Lindsey was listed on the depth chart and was supposed to start and wasn't listed with the inactives. 1 week I played him as a punt, and he didn't play, so I don't really trust him. Avery Davis, I think, is their best pure wide receiver. I think he's got their best speed at the wide receiving position, and he has double-digit points in his last 2, and before that he had 6.9 and 7.4, so he's been pretty consistent. The targets aren't fantastic, but on this team they're about as good as you can get with him and Skoranek. So I will have some Avery Davis paired with Book if I need the salary relief. Michael Meyer, their freshman tight end, and Tommy Tremble, their other tight end, 2 amazing tight ends. They don't necessarily see very many targets. Meyer has been seeing more of the workload. Tremble, you just be banking on a touchdown. But I think Meyer is an okay punt if you need that. As far as UNC, again, you could run back a game stack because UNC's offense is phenomenal, just flat out phenomenal. They average 7.7 yards per play and 5.6 yards per rush. My issue is here they're playing a Notre Dame defense that is allowing only 4.9 yards per play and 2.9 yards per carry allowed. Most notably, we saw Travis Etienne in the Clemson offense only go for 30 rushing yards, less than 1 yards per rush. They're very good against the run. And this UNC offense, they thrive on the RPO, the run-pass option, and that may not happen here. You give this defensive coordinator, Clark Lee, 2 weeks to prepare. I have to think he's going to come out with a pretty good game plan. While that may limit North Carolina a little bit, I still think this North Carolina offense is phenomenal. I mean, just phenomenal. They haven't dealt with the physicality of Notre Dame, and their offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, he admitted as much when I was looking through press conferences, but I still think the explosive plays might be there. Maybe they get off to a slow start like we've seen them do. Maybe they get down in the game, but once they really start throwing and really start going for it, it's hard for me to believe they won't put up some points. Of course, the main concern is Notre Dame coming off 2 weeks to prepare and having a very good defense. So it's not a home run game stack by any means, but North Carolina game stacks have just been an absolute moneymaker this year. So I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you're playing multiple lineups if you don't do that in at least one. So Sam Howell's fine at 8.7. Javonte Williams at 8.5, and he's been a monster. Like I mentioned, I'm not sure I want to play anybody that expensive against this Notre Dame defense. Michael Carter at 6.7 provides some salary relief, but I'll mostly be targeting the passing game. Like I mentioned, if Travis Etienne couldn't do anything against them, if UNC does, great, but that would be a hell of an accomplishment at that price point. So Howell's fine. If you're pairing him, De'Ami Brown's their clear-cut number 1 guy at 7.2. Daz Newsome at 5.7. I mean, I said Daz Newsome's dead to me because every time I play him, he's awful. Every time I don't play him, he goes off. So I'll say that's a good price for Daz Newsome if you want to play him. I'm not going to talk you off of it. It's hard for me to do so. I'd be lying if I say I'm not going to have a share or two, but I'm not going to go crazy like I was earlier this year because it really burned me. But he's been coming on as of late. This Notre Dame defense, the weakness of them is their secondary. It's just not phenomenal. They have some very good players, Owusu Karamoa, but he's mostly linebacker safety hybrid. And Kyle Hamilton's a safety. They have some studs, but the corners can be beaten, absolutely. And UNC has the guys to beat them. So those would be the top 2. Bo Corrales might play at 4.5. If he does, I think that's a fine play. That does limit Coffrey Brown at 3.7. Simmons below him. Their tight end has been seeing some work. Walston, but these guys, so you could do worse start throws, kind of like I was mentioning with UCF. But I think Corrales at 4.5 is a decent play. We don't know how healthy he's going to be, though, is the thing. All right, Central Michigan versus Eastern Michigan. Maybe a sneaky game here. Maybe a sneaky game. The over is 9-3 for Central Michigan in their last 12 games, and then the over is 7-2-1 in Eastern Michigan's last 10 games. Central Michigan, looking at their offense, they average 38 points per game at 6.1 yards per play. Very good. And they have the number 25 rushing offense, number 86 passing offense, so a better rushing team. The Eastern Michigan defense can be beat. Absolutely. They lost a lot from last year. They're number 103 in the country with 6.4 yards per play allowed. So if they're allowing 6.4, Central Michigan's averaging 6.1. You have to think Central Michigan's going to have some success here with Jim McElwain, well-coached team. I think they're going to have success. And Eastern Michigan has the number 121 rush defense. So that's a huge strength on weakness. I think Kobe Lewis at 7.4 is a very strong play. He's their workhorse. Behind him, this guy Nichols does see some workload, and he's actually seeing a lot of targets out of the backfield. So at 5,000, he's fine. But you can see the workload isn't necessarily fantastic. Now, Central Michigan did have two fantasy-relevant running backs last year. Kobe Lewis was the second guy in this offense. Jonathan Ward was number one, and they were both fantasy-relevant for pretty much the whole year in the right matchups. This could be the right matchup here. I'm not sure Nichols is quite as talented as Kobe Lewis, but we've seen him contribute to this offense. So I think they're both fine. I definitely think Kobe Lewis is the stronger play, has much higher workload, but something to monitor. Central Michigan passing offense, they spread the ball out. I'm not sure I'm interested in the quarterback at 6.6. Like I said, their passing offense hasn't done much, and they've been bringing in Ty Brock at points. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. More of the running games where I would target. You can do worse. That price point's not bad for a good offense, but Pimpleton's a clear-cut number one guy from Virginia Tech. He is target monster, and he's been by far productive. They give the ball to him on jet sweeps. He had a long rushing touchdown their last game as well. Other than that, Dixon seems like their number two guy, but it's close. Sullivan had a very good year last year at 3.5, but I've played him a few times and he hasn't done anything yet this year. They still throw the ball deep to him every now and then. He hasn't really come down with one, but it's only a matter of time before he does. And Scott had a pretty good year last year at 3.2, but again, hasn't really done much this year. Could do worse. Those are good price points, but again, it's risky. All right, as far as Eastern Michigan goes, they have a pretty inefficient offense, so while they've been scoring points, they're actually only number 102 in the country with 5.1 yards per play, so I'm not really sure it's sustainable. They keep putting up points. However, the Central Michigan passing defense is beatable. They've allowed 6.1 yards per play on the season and 262 passing yards per game allowed. So while Eastern Michigan, that inefficiency may come back to bite them later on in the year, this is a pretty decent matchup for them. They like to throw the football, and they should be able to here. When we look at their receiving threats, Beydoun now has 8 or more receptions in each of his last 3 games. He missed one game in between, so if you're looking at the game log and wondering why, no, it's not there, why he has a dud, that would be why. So I think that's a very, very good price point at 5.4. Tanner New, a walk-on, sees a decent amount of targets. He didn't really do much, though, when Beydoun came back, so I think Beydoun does limit New a little bit. I definitely think Beydoun's the stronger play. New's not a bad one. I think Beydoun and Kean Williams would be the top 2 guys I would target. Mostly just go with Beydoun because the prices are so similar. I played him his first 2 games. He did nothing, and played him a little bit his last week, and I should have had more because he went off. So he was their number 1 guy last year. I think it's close. I think all those 3 guys will see a decent amount of targets, but I would think Beydoun number 1, Kean Williams number 2 due to his home run threat ability, and Tanner New third. All right, moving on. Wyoming versus UNLV. Barn burner. The game you've all been waiting for. Wyoming had their last 2 games canceled, so we haven't seen them in a while. They're mainly a running team, but you might be surprised to find out that they only are averaging 3.9 yards per rush on the season. They're expecting Xavier Valade back, their star running back, and that's big for them. He's still number 8 in the country with 132.3 rushing yards per game, so he sees a fantastic workload. He has 397 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns in 4 games this season. He had 1,200 yards last year as a freshman. Maybe he was a sophomore last year. And he has 310 yards over his past 2 games. When you look at this UNLV rush defense, they're very beatable. They allow 108 rush yards per game. They're number 108 ranked rush defense, allowing 6.2 yards per carry. So Wyoming at 3.9 yards per rush, I think that's going to go up this week. I'd be very surprised if it doesn't. UNLV's rush defense is bad. Their pass defense is also not great, allowing 253 yards per game, but I think if Wyoming can run the ball, that's what they're going to do. So Levi Williams, their quarterback, has decent rushing upside, so you could do worse at 6.9, but Xavier Valladay is the clear-cut number one guy. Trey Smith sees some workload behind him. I believe he's a Louisville transfer. Pretty good back, so at 4.2, you could do worse. Not interested in the wide receiving options. As far as UNLV goes, they're only averaging 3.5 yards per rush. They're really struggling to get the rushing going. And Wyoming has a fantastic rush defense. They're number 9 in the country, allowing only 95 rushing yards per game and 3 yards per carry. Their pass D is beatable at number 91, allowing 261. But I think this is a get-right spot for Wyoming. They have New Mexico on deck. I think they might get rolling a little bit. So I'm not sure I love anybody on UNLV. Charles Williams, they really want to establish the run, but like I said, against that good rush defense, he probably has a good workload, but he was a guy last year who had some very big games and then some absolute duds. Wouldn't surprise me if this was a dud. So at 6.6, I'm not sure I love that. I think there are some better guys. But like I said, you're getting a starting running back on a team that wants to run the ball, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Other than that, this team has really struggled to throw the ball as well. They're number 108 in throwing the ball, 178 yards per game. Gilliam has come in, Max Gilliam, and he's looked better for them, but he's still averaging only 5.2 yards per attempt, only 133 passing yards per game. And this offense in general is 119th in the country in total yards. So I'm not interested if you need one off at the wide receiver position. Collins at 3.8 was supposed to have a big year, and he hasn't showed it yet. And like I said, Wyoming can give up some big plays passing the ball, but Kyle Williams seems to be their number one guy. The price is okay at 5.2, I guess, if you need to go there. All right, Stanford versus Cal. Stanford's passing offense has been very good this year. They're averaging 271 passing yards per game. Their rushing offense has been pretty good too, 5.1 yards per carry. It's worth noting that they've been playing from behind in most of their games, and they're not a good team. Maybe that changes here because Cal does not look like a good team either. So maybe they run the ball more in this one. Why would they run the ball? Well, Cal, I mentioned this last week. I'll mention it quickly here. Cal has an overrated defense this year. Yes, Justin Wilcox is a good defensive coach, but they lost a lot of talent. They lost Evan Weaver, who made all their stops against the run last year. Their defensive line was not good last year. It doesn't look good this year. They seem to badly be missing Evan Weaver. And then their secondary lost all their NFL guys. So a significant step back should be anticipated. Now, Wilcox is a good coach. Maybe he gets it figured out, but I think it might take him a little while. I don't really think the talent's there that they've been used to. So anyway, Cal's number 116 in the country against the rush, 224 yards per game, and they're allowing 5.3 yards per carry. So Stanford should average over 5 yards per carry if you're looking at stats. They are only allowing 175 passing yards per game. Worth noticing. So I won't have a ton of ownership interest. I think if you do, Austin Jones at 7,000 is good. He had one monster game and one terrible game, so I'm not sure what to think about Austin Jones. In general, this isn't really the Stanford rushing offense of old. So I think everybody's fine, but I'm not going to play a ton of this game. Simi Fehoko seems like their number one wide receiver. He's very boom or bust at 4.8. I think he's fine. Michael Wilson below him at 4.4. Decent price on these guys for a team that's really been throwing the ball. Davis Mills, that's a decent price at 7.8. Everybody's decent. Connor Weddington came back. I've been banging on this guy's drum his whole career. When he gets the ball, he looks fantastic, but he hasn't been getting the ball ever. Well, he finally got the ball, and he had 8 catches for 77 yards. So maybe this is a breakout, but I think they spread the ball out a lot because they have actually a very good receiving core. All right, as far as Cal, I would be interested in playing Cal's rushing attack, but let's step back a little bit. So Stanford's averaging 114 rushing yards allowed, 5.2 yards per carry allowed. So normally I would target this Cal rushing offense. However, this offense has been bad. They're only averaging 307 yards per game. That's 122nd in FBS. It's going to be weakness on weakness. Stanford's giving up 464 yards per game and 35 points per game defensively, but Cal's offense stinks. So maybe this is a get-right spot. I don't know. I would feel better if Cal wasn't supposed to be without 3 of their offensive linemen. They were last game, probably going to be the case here, although information's not out. And they were without their running back, Chris Brown Jr., who, let's see, has he been rolled out this week? Sounds like he has a chance to return, so I'm not sure that out is accurate. If he does, I think he's a fine play at 5.2. If he doesn't, behind him, I played Shaw last week, Wisconsin transfer. I thought he was going to be the guy. When I saw Chris Brown was out, I pivoted to Shaw, and he did nothing. I messed up. Dancy was the guy at 5.1. So if he misses, Dancy would be the guy. Other than that, I have no interest. They can't pass the ball. All right, as far as a positional recap, that wraps up all our games here. I'm personally going to be paying up somewhat at the quarterback position. I think you want one of these studs, most likely. They're all fine. I think Willis and Gabriel should be the 2 most expensive guys. I'm not sure I'll have a ton of Ellinger, but like I said, he's always fine. Howell, especially in game stacks. Other than that, I'm going to kind of skip that next tier because I'm not super interested in that. I will have a decent amount of Ian Book at 7.3. And Brock Purdy at 6.7 might be the lowest I go. I just don't love anybody down here. Like if AJ Martinez is announced as a starter at 6.1, he has rushing upside, maybe. But there's really nothing exciting. The pricing's pretty good on this one. No Black Friday bargain bin deals. All right, as far as running back, I'm not going to pay up that much. Like I said, I'm more paying for wide receivers and quarterbacks on the slate. But you have some decent options. I mean, Kyron Williams would be fantastic if he was healthy. Breece Hall is always in play. Javonte Williams has been a beast. I'm probably not going to get there. I might get up to Valladay. That might be the highest I'm able to get. But I will get up to Kobe Lewis. I'll have a significant amount of Kobe Lewis. I think there are a lot of fine options at running back, but I don't think any of these guys are like in a huge tier above anybody else. You know, Goodson's fine. Jones is fine. I will have a lot of Josh Mack and Kobe Lewis, maybe my 2 most owned running backs. I'm not sure I'm going to fit them in the same lineup all the time. Depends on what I'm doing. Sargent's fine. Robinson's fine. A lot of fine. I will have some UCF running backs. Their price points are too cheap. All the way down here, Greg McCray, Otis Anderson, Lou Nichols, if you're getting crazy, and any other punt options I mentioned earlier. Mainly Chris Tyree, I guess, but like I said, that's super risky. Wide receiving position, there's not a lot at the top. I think if I'm paying up for Marlon Williams or De'Ami Brown. Jalen Robinson and Trey Nixon are decent. Daz Newsom's decent. Robinson, if he plays. Baidoon. I'm probably going to have to play some cheap wide receiving options this week since I'm paying up. And you always pay cheap wide receiving options. But I don't love them. I think the value is kind of in that like 5,000 and up range, which sounds weird. So I don't love anybody down here. You know, I'll play some Avery Davis. Might be forced into playing some Yarbrough, but I definitely don't love it. So I'm going to be on the hunt and see if I can find any super values down here. I think that would really help my team. I didn't really see any as I was going over the video that were really, really stuck out, but I mentioned them as I went along. So yeah, I think any of those guys I mentioned would be fine. So I know it probably went long, so thanks for listening. Have a great holiday season, and best of luck to you.